What is up, everyone? Brandon Ferst, aka First Report, representing the First Off the Bench Podcast Network. Everyone comes off the bench, but we are first. Welcome in, or should I say, welcome back. Wherever you are, it's probably very, very warm outside, maybe in the triple digits in most places. That can only mean one thing. September is here, and it's time to talk some NFL football. We're recording on September 1st, 1 week away from the opener next week, the big one, essentially. And when I say we, I, of course, say myself and my co-host, Raider Jim Martinez. You can find Mr. Martinez at Raider Jim 1090. How you doing today, sir?
Hey, I am doing fabulous. Here we are again to talk about NFL football for the third, fourth year in a row. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of interesting as we were leading up to today and I was making my notes, I thought I'm getting a pattern here. 2019 was a great year. 2020, not so good. 2021, great year. And then, we had the family turmoil and things like that hit my radar earlier this year. And now I feel like a bear that just woke up from a nice winter's nap and I'm ready to go. Let's talk football.
Fantastic. And you know what those bears need to do after hibernation? They got to eat. And that's what we're going to do for you. They got to eat. And it's time to eat. If you're an NFL fan, if you're an NFL gambler, this is it. This is kind of the time. I've always said the toughest weeks to bet in NFL are the first 2 weeks and the last 2 weeks. You don't really know what's going on early on with NFL free agency, which we'll get to here in a bit. There's just a lot of moving pieces. And then at the end, you have a lot of, well, what are they really playing for? Are they playing to lose? Are they playing to, maybe they want the 7 seed instead of the 6? And how does that affect it? So going forward, we're going to be here pretty much every Thursday breaking things down for you. We do have a little schedule change. We used to obviously record on Wednesday. We will be recording on Thursday, so we won't be covering the Thursday night games. But you know what? At the end of the day, I think we're all kind of in agreement. Outside of the first Thursday game, everything else, it's kind of, we're happy football's on Thursday night, but it is not pretty. And most teams probably not big fans of playing on that Thursday. But with that being said, it is time to kind of dive into the off season and look at the draft, free agency, and how our teams look and, look around the league as well. Raider Jim, I'm going to give you the honors. Tell us how the offseason went for the Raiders.
Well, I'll tell you, the big news, of course, and it's really not earth-shattering and not a real surprise. The Raiders cut Alex Leatherwood, who was their number 1 pick last year, offensive lineman. And part of me is slightly upset with that because, he had a rough go of it last year at the beginning of the season. They threw him in at tackle, and if you read his resume, he was a guard. He was born to be a guard. He played guard. He cut his teeth playing guard, and the Raiders moved him to tackle, and then people were surprised. And I know I said it on the podcast, and I told it to some friends at work that are Raider fans. I said, and I said it on Twitter, if you move him back to guard, he's going to start getting his feet back, and he did. He was not a Pro Bowl player, not Pro Bowl caliber, but he was starting to get his confidence back. And then I don't know if he had a bad offseason, maybe he laxed, took it easy during the offseason, but his preseason play was not that well. He got absolutely flattened a couple times. And so they have bid adieu to Alex Leatherwood, and he is now a Chicago Bear, is what I understand.
Oh, wow.
Yes, it happened that quickly. Speaking of Bears, he is now a Chicago Bear, or at least they are looking at him. So, and looking at draft and free agency, one thing this tells me is you can't take some position players and ask them to play somewhere else. He was a guard. Let him be a guard. Doesn't mean you're interchangeable just because you're big. It's a certain skill set to play offensive tackle, and it's a certain skill set to play guard, and another yet to play center. So I put a little bit of the onus on the Raiders for that, and that leads me to my other comment, which is the Raiders just don't draft very well. Let's be real honest. The last few seasons, they didn't take the 5th year on good Lord, now I can't even remember his name.
Jonathan Abram. And Josh Jacobs.
And Josh Jacobs, that's it. And Abram's a hard hitter. He plays like a demon, but they still have him slated as the starting safety. I don't know if that's wise or not, because I don't know that he can last 3 games without getting hurt. That's been his history. Josh Jacobs finally came around, finally started hitting it hard, did pretty good towards the end of the season. But if you really look at what he has done for the Raiders since they drafted him, he has not been the second coming of Marcus Allen or Bo Jackson, not even close. So the Raiders have to do better with draft. Maybe they have done better this time. We're going to see. They had a great offensive lineman out there, but now they're hurting on the offensive line. They had 1 tackle. Well, they got rid of Leatherwood. Then they had 1 tackle go down. Now they've had another tackle go down. And now they're bringing in, apparently they're in talks today. I just saw this while I was waiting to get started. They're bringing in one of the offensive tackles from the Packers to give a strong look. And I'll tell you what, if he was a starting tackle that protected Aaron Rodgers, then you're looking at a pretty good player. So hopefully, on the defensive side of the ball, I liked what I saw in the preseason. They actually did a lot better than I thought they would. I appreciated that they really weren't putting starters out there, especially on the offensive side. And they had some, they're very strong in the backfield, which I think is going to pay dividends for them. They haven't been that strong in the offensive backfield for the last few years. Now they have more horses back there, and I think they're going to make Jacobs play to a higher level, because if he wants to be that starter, that go-to guy, then he's going to really have to step up. Otherwise, he's got at least 2 guys that are ready to step in. Derek Carr, Devontae Adams, watch out. I'm just hoping that it plays out the way it's supposed to. I like when Devontae Adams came out a couple weeks ago and said, I'm not here so I can hang out with Derek Carr. I'm here so I can win football games. So, and what about your Eagles?
Yeah, before we get into that, I do have a couple just comments. The Leatherwood situation was interesting to me, and I'm glad you kind of brought up he was a 1st-round pick and they moved him to tackle. I do feel they did a disservice to him in that, and mainly it was kind of self-imposed, because I guess us, and the critics and the fans, it's hard to sell a 1st-round guard. But if you could sell a 1st-round tackle, now, not a whole lot of people. I mean, most of us can watch college football and then the NFL, but there are a lot of people who don't know outside of the quarterback. So, they see that, and ESPN puts up probably the T/G, and they go, oh, okay, if they're taking him in the 1st round, he's going to be a tackle. That's very unfortunate. And I've heard, I'm 140 pounds soaking wet, so an offensive line is not my position. So don't ever take my word for it. But I've heard from, my friends who played that position that center is very difficult, as is tackle, but for different reasons. And I'm not discounting the guard position, but for the guard position, I think it's a little more kind of straightforward. You pretty much know who you got to block. With the tackle, you got to, who's picking up that blitz. Did that end drop into coverage? And, obviously he didn't pick it up as quickly as as they would have liked. And secondly, I will say, I don't know, and I haven't seen too much of the Raiders or anything like that, but I do wonder if Josh McDaniels maybe wants to run maybe a more high tempo, something like that. And maybe Leatherwood didn't really fit the bill, because I could understand declining a 5th-year option on it, but cutting him, especially what you talked about with the offensive line issues. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say maybe you don't make him the starter, but I mean, depth has to be a part of it at some point.
And I didn't get to see a lot myself, but I will tell you that you picked up on it. You probably have seen as much or maybe more than I have of the Raider games in the preseason. But the one thing that really stood out to me in that first game, and as I talked about it with some of my Raider Nation friends, wow, did you see how much running they did to the outside? Did you see how fast some of those linemen were? Did you see how these guys were getting out in front of the backs and going downfield? So I think you hit it. I think this guy is bringing back a whole different look. He's got the receivers. He knows he can do that. But I think he watched the film, looked at the history, and he saw, but they have no running game.
Yeah.
It really, nothing that's going to be a threat.
Yeah. And I expect Carr and Adams to be a great fit. But you know what? There's 11 guys on that defense. And if that's all you have, you're going to see double and triple teams. Now, Waller obviously is going to get his in as well, but they are going to need kind of that supporting cast around those two as well. So be very interesting to see there. We'll dive a little bit deeper into the Raiders season at the end when we talk about some win futures for our teams. But for myself, obviously my Eagles, it's been a interesting offseason. And I'll say this right now. I'm not the only one who said this. There are plenty of people out there who will say this as well. You could make a very good case that the Philadelphia Eagles are the most improved team from last year to this year. And I think it really goes and it speaks to what Howie Roseman has built. And now, obviously, the A.J. Brown acquisition, incredible. My hat goes off to Howie Roseman. That man looked himself in the mirror and went, I haven't been able, outside of Devontae Smith last year, that seems like it hit. But he looked himself in the mirror and went, I haven't been able to draft a good wide receiver in the last 3 years. Take Devontae Smith out of it. But we need a wide receiver. How can we do this? Well, how about this? We trade that first round pick that you're probably going to use a wide receiver on, and you go out and get A.J. Brown. Then they sign him right away. A.J. Brown, I would say he is the top, or the I guess quintessential number one target. The first time the Eagles have had that, I mean, since T.O. And I know that sounds crazy, but really, I mean, think of it. It's someone that you can really build around. And I think now Jalen Hurts, I've heard all preseason about how many steps forward he's taken and this and that, no more excuses. You have 3 legitimate weapons in Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, and I really am high on Dallas Goedert this year. I think you have a good running game in Miles Sanders, who can catch the ball out of the backfield. And I've always been a Boston Scott fan. He's kind of that poor man's Darren Sproles. And I think that fits perfectly into this offense. And the other part of this too, if you look at the strength of schedule, you look at the bottom, it's the 4 NFC East teams, and the Eagles are right there. I think the Eagles have a really good shot of winning double-digit games, and I have to imagine they are the favorite to win the NFC East. I know they're not. I think depending on where you look, you may see a little bit, a plus 160 for Dallas and plus 170 for Philly, but it's going to be neck and neck. I think the Eagles are the best team in this division. I think defensively, they have made strides. They bring in Bradbury. And they bring in Gardner Johnson from New Orleans. And I know Coach was not happy about that. So the defense has been improved. And the offensive line for the Eagles, you could make the case may be the best in football. And the last time that happened, the Eagles won a Super Bowl. So, I'm not getting my Super Bowl tickets yet, but I definitely expect the Eagles to be a playoff team. The draft, obviously, I thought they hit it out of the park. Keep an eye on Nakobe Dean, the middle linebacker, a position the Eagles have needed for quite some time. He has some injury issues. He fell to the 3rd round. I think he could be a steal. And then Jordan Davis, goodness gracious, maybe one of the largest human beings ever. And he runs a 4.6 or whatever, 4.55. Whatever. The dude looks like a freak of nature, and he's going to learn from arguably one of the best defensive tackles to ever play the game in Fletcher Cox. So I wish there was some negativity I could throw in there. Because as an Eagles fan and just, as a pessimist that I am, it kind of worries me when I only have positive thoughts, but that's where I am right now with the Eagles. I mean, next Sunday, the September 11th will be the first Sunday of football. I mean, they start out with the Lions. I mean, cool. That's like being a bear in hibernation, waking up and they're a deer right there for you. Okay, cool. Perfect. That's how we get out of hibernation. So that'll be interesting, but I really do think the sky is the limit for the Eagles, pun intended there. But we'll see. At the end of the day, though, I don't think they're the best team in the NFC. I think they're probably about 3rd or 4th at best, is their ceiling. And that's okay. It's a young team. This window isn't closing, anything like that. So very, very excited, not only for football season to start, but to see how the Eagles kind of all mesh together under Sirianni for a 3rd year. I think this will be year 3 for him. So, but with that, Raider Jim, around the league, any other surprises in free agency, the draft, or even some of the preseason kind of performances that we've seen this year?
Well, I think one of the disheartening things for me is it seemed, there's so much going on with the government day in, day out. You just can't avoid it. If you open your eyes, it's there. If you go to bed, it's there. And I'm surprised how much is starting to be out there. The whole situation in Cleveland for the Browns, that's a mess. We had another situation today where one of the Saints just got arrested for, brandishing a weapon at somebody in a road rage situation. I can't remember the guy's name, but it's like the second time in X amount of months. But those Saints, that they have that reputation. They're what an awful, awful group of people they are. And that's
coach is going to make note of that. He just clipped that. He'll be ready next time he hops on here. He'll be ready. He might even start the show. I'll just let him go straight into it.
But I'm glad to see there's the positive stories too. I'm surprised at some of the people that aren't on rosters right now. And of course, this is the year where the Raiders did a great thing in filling the backfield. Marlon Mack looking for a team. Sony Michel looking for a team. Philip Lindsay looking for a team. It's like, are you kidding me? Tyler Johnson's isn't on the roster for the Bucs right now, but apparently they may re-sign him again. And the young man out of the tight end out of Buffalo that they let go, OJ Howard, kind of surprises me also. That they thought he would be the tandem, other tight end, but apparently not. So somebody's going to pick up a good ball player there. It's just interesting to see some of these things that have happened. Even Logan Ryan, the cornerback from Tampa Bay, is not out there.
There's nothing like cut day in the NFL, in any other sport. I mean, it is here. You want him? Here, take him. Even on the Leatherwood situation, I had heard they made 32 or 31 calls and they got 31 no's, and that's why he was released. And obviously, I think for the Bears, they were happy that, hey, we don't have to give anything up for him if that's official. It. But yeah, and I'll even kind of double down on that because I do think you bring up a good point. The Deshaun Watson situation is, I feel like after talking about it, I need to go shower because it's just, it's gross. You don't want to touch it. Like there's nothing good about it. 11 games, and I know he missed all of last year as well too, but I just shake my head at all of this, and it's very hypocritical for us to see the NFL matters, or you see the cut scenes in Cleveland, maybe they'll have some, the Browns here for the community. You paid someone who 40 or 20 to 30 women have come out and accused of this. And I understand the legalese, there wasn't enough there, blah, blah, blah. But once again, like, I'm not going to sit here if it was one or two, okay, maybe, but 20 to 30, there's something going on. And then you also throw in the fact that the Houston Texans were having the masseuses sign NDAs. It's all ugly around. And kind of a local story here right now is the Matt Ariza situation, AKA Punt Dog. And he's been cut. Obviously that's a little more convoluted than I would say the Deshaun Watson, mainly because I haven't dove too deep into that. And that's mainly because I don't want to. But the fact of the matter is the NFL now, and I would say pretty much my entire life has had an issue with keeping players out of trouble. And it is what it is. But you also, I will say, the amount of players is more than any other sport. So, I'm not, I don't want to point to this or that, but, you look at basketball teams, they got 15 players max? Well, the NFL teams, they got 52 on their active and then 10 more on the practice. So there's, obviously opportunities, more per capita, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, it's very unfortunate because I do feel like it's been a bit of it's been kind of the way it has been over the last few years. It's kind of, who's it going to be? I saw something, I think the Chargers were the only team to not have a player arrested in the last 2 or 3 years. Yikes. And we're talking
the Matt Ariza thing, unfortunately, what it brought back to my mind, and it's not apples to apples, and I'm not trying to say it is, but Darrell Russell for the Raiders. Blue chipper out of San Diego, top dog at USC when he played there, top draft pick, went to the Raiders, was on the Super Bowl team roster. And then what happens? All of a sudden, this girl comes out and says, hey, this guy and a couple of his friends, drugged me and took advantage of me, and I'll never forget. And this is the mentality of some of these guys. And he meant it as innocently as could be, but he just said, we didn't force anybody, and I've got film to prove it, basically, because they had taped the whole thing. And you're like, oh my gosh. Really?
It's like out of one grave into another.
Exactly. And of course, we all know what happened to his career after that, and he missed the Super Bowl. And then it was just, the tragic demise that one day on the LA streets. And last year with the kid from the Raiders that, blew up that car and killed somebody. And
yeah,
I get it. They're rich. They get a lot of money, and some of them came from nothing, and all of a sudden they're rich. They've got everything handed to them on a gold platter, not a silver platter. But at some point, the accountability really has to be there. The veterans have to take more responsibility. The NFL Players Association, I don't know, somehow, somewhere. But as you said, it's just got to stop.
Yeah,
they got to do a better job.
I agree. And I will say also for the NFL, I don't think it's a good look to suspend Calvin Ridley an entire season for betting $1,000 on a game he wasn't even a part of while he was out for the year. Right. I'm not going to sit here and say it's okay to do that, but you can't sit here and say you're out for an entire year. You're out for only 11 games, and we had to actually fight for that to be that. So I don't know. It's tough if you're outside looking in. I have, coworkers that I talk about football, and they say, I don't like it because of, these things. And I can't deny that, that's fair. But I do try and find some positives here and there. It's not as easy as it used to be, but I'm just excited. I think there are a lot of stories that we probably don't even know yet. A lot of young players who haven't played and they make a team.
Absolutely.
I think that's just fantastic. And I think there will be positives from this year, but unfortunately, there are a lot of negatives out there, but it is time to dive into our divisional focus. We're going to be focusing on the AFC West and the NFC East for obvious reasons. Raider Jim, looking over the AFC West, I'll just go through the odds right here. You got Kansas City at plus 175, Chargers at plus 250, Denver at plus 275, and the Raiders at plus 700 to win this division. Now, I don't quite remember. I think I got this off of DraftKings. I'm sure you can go to many of the sports books and find slightly different numbers, but I would say that's kind of where most of it is. Correct. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Kansas City, the favorite, and I like the Raiders 7-1. Like, I mean, I don't know. I'd put a couple bucks on them. I think they'll be okay. I don't know if they're going to finish last. I think they'll definitely be better than Denver. But Raider Jim, what are your thoughts on the AFC West?
I think it was just last night or the night before, Tim Conway on his radio show, he happened to start talking sports in the start of the NFL season. And so he was reading the list of, the professionals, the experts, and what one of them was putting down as, here's your win victory loss totals for some of your teams. This guy had the Raiders at 8 and 9. I'm like, no. But then I said, who is this guy? But then you sent me over the numbers today. It's like plus 700. How about that? And so if that's the case, I'll take that. I'll definitely take that. I think that's going to be good. Kansas City's definitely the team to beat. Are they unbeatable? No. I said that last year. They're not unbeatable anymore. People know. They got rid of Tyreek Hill. And you do that, and everybody's first reaction is, oh, that's it. Got rid of a target. No, I think they still have plenty of target. They also have, Edwards-Helaire, who's he's like, I think, one of the greatest running backs. Offensive line may still be a little questionable, but it was even an article today that stated there are a few of the players who have been named to the top 100 offensive. Mahomes, Edwards-Helaire, and they said it was surprising because who didn't get named were the offensive linemen, not as a group, not as an individual. The center, and his name escapes me right now.
I think is it Creed Humphrey?
That's it. Yeah. He is one of the best at the position. Too. And there's that very cerebral, very smart, he's in charge. He's kind of, he's just the guy. So for him to not be noted like that, I think Kansas City is going to be the team to beat. it's going to be a horse race after that. Those other 3 horses, it's going to be interesting to see. Vegas is going into game 1, I think, a 3.5 point underdog at LA when they play the Chargers. I kind of like that because I don't think there's going to be much difference from what you saw on the preseason game and what you're going to see this time around. I think they are going to come out. I think the defense is sharpening up. We know they've got the passing game, the running game. It is going to be back on the defense. Jonathan Abrams, how smart can he play? He has to play, he hits hard, but he's got to play smart. He's gotten a few penalties too when he is in the lineup. The Chargers at plus 250, little surprising to me because they were the 29th defense last year. And here's my question to you. It's a question in my head, but I'd like to know your opinion. Bosa's great. Bosa is, he's a go-getter. Also a tendency to get a little dinged up though. And is he going to have that issue that some players get where because they're going out, they play so hard and they get, when you play at that level and you get injured, even if they say it's a minor injury, it's a different kind of a minor injury than you and I would get. That's a lot of tendon, muscle, and things like that are really taking a beating. Is he going to get physically burned out? Not mentally and not ability-wise, but just, injury-wise. They picked up J.C. Jackson, who played for the Pats. Great pickup in the secondary. But are the Chargers doing that thing that a lot of teams do and the Raiders have been guilty of? Why did they sign Khalil Mack?
Yeah. It's kind of like J.J. Watt a few years ago in Arizona, at least in my mind. Like, I don't know if Khalil Mack makes the Chargers closer to a Super Bowl. It may sell tickets. It may sell jerseys. But I don't, and this is no disrespect to Khalil Mack, but
absolutely
I
not.
don't think he's that game changer anymore. But going back to the Bosa thing, I think possibly, I actually fear, obviously, you don't want to see ACLs or MCLs or all, they're out for the year injuries. But I really kind of fear the quote unquote chronic injuries more, because when you're going week in, week out, is Bosa going to play today? Well, he had a bad hamstring. Well, it's today, Tuesday. Did he practice? No. Today's Wednesday, limited practice. Thursday. Right. I mean, that's a better nightmare.
Right.
Game time decisions for players like that. They're kind of nightmares. And Joey Bosa has I don't want to say a reputation, but he does get nicked up. And I don't want to say he's made out of glass or anything like that, because he's definitely not. But he gets nicked up, and it's not he blew out his knee, he's out for the year, we'll see him next year. It's, he's got a busted hamstring, we'll see him next week. Okay, well, maybe we'll see him the week after. And it just kind of turns into that, if he's out for the year, okay, we need a defensive end right here. If he's still kind of playing, it's hard to kind of improve on that. So that's going to be interesting. But I do think I think the entirety of the AFC West, and you take Denver out of this because they are really good defensively, but I think the AFC West, all 3 of those teams' biggest struggles are going to be defense. Right. I think the biggest reason the Chiefs haven't won a Super Bowl in the last, 2 years, despite how good they've been and dominant, when they get to the playoffs, the defense doesn't get the job done. And the Chargers are the same way. I mean, you brought it up, 29th overall. That's, to me, you're going to be seeing 49 to 56 over underlines on the Chargers all year. And you're going to have to think pretty hard about that over, because that defense is going to struggle. And like I said, I don't know if Khalil Mack makes them a top 10 defense. They might be top 20 now, or maybe top 25, and JC Jackson as well, but it doesn't put them into where they need to be to take down the Chiefs for me right now. Justin Herbert's incredible, but Denver, I think, there are a lot of people really overhyping Denver. And I know Russell Wilson's there and things like that. I don't think Russell Wilson is that piece that makes them better than the Chargers and Chiefs. I don't even know if Russell Wilson is that piece that makes them better than the Raiders, if we're being honest. And now, once again, the defense for Denver is good. It's always been their strength. I mean, take the Manning years out, but pretty much post Elway, the strength of that team has been the defense. And they're now in a division that there's so many offensive weapons. It's going to be very interesting. I would probably sprinkle, like I said, some money on the Raiders. I don't know about winning the division. I'd love to see the playoff odds because I don't think they win the division, but I think a wild card is in their grasp for the Raiders.
And the over under on wins. If the over under on wins right now is 8.5, I'm pretty sure they're going to win 9, maybe 10. So okay, I'll take that bet right now.
I would say the only reason why it's lower or that low is because a lot of people look at that division and may see 4 or 5 losses just like that. Once again, I don't agree with that, but I do think that's how they kind of put things together. And it's going to be very interesting in the AFC West. I'm excited. I think it is top to bottom the best division in football. And it's a perfect segue because the NFC East, I would say the NFC South is the worst division in football just because how top heavy it is, but the NFC East is right there. And it's just because everybody's just kind of either above average or lower. And that is, of course, talking about the Eagles. I mentioned it a bit before, but the NFC East future lines, for the most part, are going to look like this. This one on DraftKings, I had Dallas and Philadelphia are both plus 150. And then you have Washington, the Commanders, we'll try to remember that, plus 500, and then the Giants at plus 800. I think the odds are showing exactly what we all expect, a 2-horse race. Philadelphia and Dallas. Now, the Carson Wentz to Washington does throw a little bit of kind of, raise your eyebrow, but until I see Carson Wentz repeat what he did in 2017, I can't, put a whole lot of credence in that. And this division is a lot better than it was when Washington was winning this division at whatever 6-9-1 or whatever that number is. So as I said before, I think the Eagles, try and find a betting site that's going to make the Eagles maybe closer to 170. And they're, big on the Cowboys, find that. But I really do think the Eagles win this division. Plus 150, maybe not something I would throw some money on just because I'd like to get closer to 170 or even 200 would be amazing. But I do think the Eagles win the division. And then it's Dallas, Washington, and the Giants. The Giants, this is Daniel Jones make it or break it year. I would assume and I will say it's tough. It's probably his third coach in the last 3 years, not ideal, but at the end of the day, they have to figure it out with him. There was a lot of talk about him when he was drafted, showed some signs, but I think if you ask most Giants fans, they're looking at it going, okay, you got 17 games to prove it. And I don't think he's going to be able to do that. And a lot of that is because the defense we talked about the AFC West being maybe not so strong on the defensive side of the ball. I think the NFC East is pretty darn. I mean, you got Micah Parsons out there in Dallas, Chase Young in Washington, and you got pick your poison in Philadelphia as well. So it's going to be difficult for Daniel Jones to kind of get himself together against those defenses. But Raider Jim, what are your thoughts overall on the NFC East outlook?
I'm looking at your schedule right now for the Eagles. You got a pretty good out of the gate.
Yeah, 4-0. 4-0.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know how Minnesota is shaping up this year. That's your game too, but you start out with the Lions, you go to the Vikings, Commanders, Jacksonville. The tough one might be Arizona. I saw those guys play the other day, and oh my goodness, they're like a little track meet out there, just watching those guys run.
Texas Tech NFL style.
Yeah, I think Dallas took a real big hit when they lost their offensive lineman that protects old Dak out there. So they're kind of scrambling too, like the Raiders, for an offensive tackle. But other than that, I agree with you. I think this one is Philadelphia's to lose this year. Going to be fun to watch because those were always some of the best matchups when they were, both the teams were really fighting because you knew one of them was going to make a deep run in the playoffs and end up in the Super Bowl. So that's going to be fun to watch. I do, as you and I are both, we're fans of Coach Rivera. So I do hope nothing but the best for them. I know they'll be competitive, and I hope he continues to right the ship over there in Washington through all the things they've been through. And the Giants, what do you say? It's just
Yeah.
it's good to be an Eagles fan.
I think the Commanders are arguably, at least for me, the most likable team out there. I still have great respect for Carson Wentz. I think if he doesn't do what he did in 2017 before he got hurt, the Eagles are still without a Super Bowl. The Eagles do not win the Super Bowl unless they have home field advantage, period. I'll go to my grave on that one. And that was pretty much all Carson Wentz up till that point. And obviously, Nick Foles did his thing fantastic. And then you brought it up, Ron Rivera, with what he went through and when he went through it. I mean, he got done with cancer and all that. And then it seemed like the minute he's like, all right, let's do it. Boom, here comes COVID. And he's the guy that's like, okay, I have to be very careful. This isn't like, okay, I'm going to be out for a game. This is now my life, essentially. You have a very low immune system after chemo and all that. And then I've always been a Chase Young fan. I don't know why. I hate Ohio State. But for whatever reason, I've just liked Chase Young. But at the end of the day, I think they're right where they should be. Third place is their max. I think the Giants and Commanders will fight it out for third and fourth, and then the Eagles will fight it out. Eagles and Cowboys will fight it out at the top. But
and let's not forget him fielding a team with a quarterback that was put together with duct tape and chewing gum. Yep. I mean, they really just to be able to go out there and still do the coach talks and tell everybody, we've got a shot and leave it on the field. And by God, they left it on the field some nights.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the other, if Alex Smith was still there, I mean, they would be the darlings of the league. But yeah, good for, those guys to be getting on the right track. But I don't think it's going to spell immediate success. But once again, I don't think it's against Ron Rivera's coaching abilities or anything like that. So Raider Jim, any other divisions that kind of caught your eye? Something maybe that, you were surprised about?
AFC East. I know that they did well, and I know that they were a little beat up in the playoffs. I don't know why I'm not sold on the Bills being the representatives for the AFC in the Super Bowl. I don't know why. I think they're going to be that team that continues to almost get there, but not quite. And the Bengals are still out there. And the Bengals are pretty darn good. They're competitive, and they got that swagger quarterback who makes everybody believe we can do anything. Yeah. Let's just go out there and do it. So I'm not sold on the Bills and the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins bringing in Tyreek Hill, that's going to be a pretty good race in the AFC East, I believe. In the first two spots, I don't know how you feel about that. The Patriots, I think their days of domination are done. For at least a year or two.
At least on the Patriots side of things, I agree. They'll be, 8-9, 9-8. They'll be a competitive football team. I don't think a Bill Belichick team will ever be drafting in the top 5 because of what they did on the field. But I agree with you. The Bengals, I feel, are kind of due for a bit of a Super Bowl hangover. Now there is that stat out there that I think it was Jim Kelly is the last under 25 quarterback to make his debut or to, lose his debut in the Super Bowl. No one else has gone back since Jim Kelly. Obviously, he did that, 4 years in a row, poor guy. But I just, for the Bengals, I don't want to say last year was a fluke because it wasn't. Joe Burrow is amazing. Jamar Chase is a game changer. Zach Taylor is a fantastic coach. But I just think all offseason it's been, okay, you got a 22, 23-year-old quarterback with a 22-year-old wide receiver and a 40-year-old head coach. Here comes the dynasty. I don't know. I'm not sold. And that division, I think they are the best team in that division. I'm definitely not sold on Pittsburgh, definitely not sold on the other teams there. But in terms of getting back to the Super Bowl, I don't see the Bengals there. I don't even see the Bengals playing championship weekend. Bills are an interesting one for me because I agree with you. They're maybe that team that's almost there. I mean, nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills, and it's kind of like coming back again. But I'm a huge fan of Josh Allen, what they put together. Sean McDermott,
absolutely
fantastic. The one that really, I guess, one team that I'm a little more I guess, hyped on than others. And this is, I'm not talking playoffs or anything like that, but I would keep an eye on the Jets. I don't think they're going to be very good, but I think they're going to spoil some things late. They're going to be a team that maybe beats the Patriots and keeps them out of a wild card spot. Maybe beats the Bills on a Thursday night or a Sunday night in a game they had no business being a part of. I really think the Jets have actually improved. Now, the Zach Wilson situation, is he going to continue to improve? But they have, they had a great draft. I think they have some really good young players. I think they'll probably be better than most people think. But once again, I'm not screaming playoffs for these guys. More spoiler and more, don't sleep on these guys. I mean, it used to be, oh, the Jets are 4.5-point underdogs at home. I don't know who they're playing, but give me them. And I don't think that'll be that way this year. So be
and
very
sometimes the great motivator for a team like the Jets is the level of expectation, which is none. Nobody expects you to win. You're that boxer that, hey, you want to go fight the champ because his opponent broke his leg. We need somebody to put in the ring on Friday night. Sure, I'll do it. What happens? He goes in, he beats the champ. So again, like you said, are they going to, they're plus 2,200 to win the East. So
I'm not putting money on them to win the East.
Right. But like you say, can they mess up somebody else's season?
Yeah.
Can they, punch somebody on the playground once or twice just to make, hey, we still play football, guys. We can still play football. And I think you're right. That's what we're going to see.
Agreed. So finally finishing it up here, we're going to dive into our individual teams, look at their win totals and kind of say over, under. And, we also have the Saints in there for coach as well. Hopefully he'll be joining us next week. I think he said he was on a flight to Denver as we speak. So hopefully he's safe and enjoys the Mile High City when he's out there, but hopefully we'll get him next week. But we'll start with the Eagles. They have out of the three teams, we're going to talk about the highest win total or expected 9.5. Now, once again, this is 17 games, so it's not that usual 16 games. Myself personally, I think everyone kind of knows how I'm going to go with this, but it's going to take a minimum of 10 games to win any division, I would assume, in football. And I think the Eagles win the division. Therefore, I'm taking the over here, 9.5. As I said, I think the Eagles are halfway there 6 weeks in. They might be 4-5-1. Like I said, the Vikings, Cardinals are going to be a little tricky. But the Lions, Commanders, and Jaguars, those should be 3 wins immediately. So I think the Eagles could be looking 4-1, maybe even 5-0 before the end. I mean, before we've even hit Halloween. And that's halfway to where you need to be. So I would take the Eagles with the over 9.5. I hate the analogy of a slam dunk, but it kind of feels like it. So everyone should probably just fade me and make some money. But anyways,
what are the Vikings looking like right now? Do you know?
For me, the Vikings are that team that you just don't know. They could come out, excuse me, and look like, here they come. This is the Vikings of old. But the biggest thing for the Vikings is their defense. Kirk Cousins cannot win football games by himself. He can barely win football games, putting up, but he's not going to put up 28 points a game. He's just not. You're going to have to be happy in that 17 to 24 range. And that used to be fine for the Vikings when that defense was good. Well, last year it was not, and neither were the Vikings. But at the end of the day, I think the Vikings on paper are better than a lot of the teams, or that I should probably say, they're better on paper than what I give them credit for. For me, the biggest thing is Kirk Cousins. I have watched Kirk Cousins pretty much his entire career, and there's a reason I call him Captain Overthrow. The guy just overthrows everybody, and that's not great because most overthrows are going to turn into interceptions, whether it's over the wide receiver's head or the wide receiver reaching up for it, tipping it, and then it's an easy tip drill for the safety or cornerback, whoever that is. So I think it's a Monday night game, so that could be a little bit of an interesting one. It will be the home opener for the Eagles, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but I know they're on the road against Detroit, I believe, week 1. So I would assume week 2 they're at home. But I think it's going to be, like I said, the Cardinals, Vikings, maybe, I don't want to say coin flips, but the Vikings are just a team that I could very easily see going out and just running over a team and then the next week losing to the Jaguars. I don't know why, but it just seems like the Vikings are they're essentially a tech stock. They're up and down. Where are we today? And that's scary, honestly. I mean, for fans of that team and for teams that are playing them, because it doesn't matter what happened last week. They're going to come either, and be really good or really bad, but it seems like they're never just kind of like consistent all year. There are peaks and valleys. And I just think the Eagles can take advantage of that. But for the Raiders, what are your thoughts? We had the Vegas Raiders 8.5 is the win total, as you kind of alluded to earlier. I think Tim Conway's expert had them right below that at 8 and 9. But Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? 8.5 for the Raiders. What do you pick?
It really insults me because they were even better than that last year when it comes right down to it. They beat the Chargers last year. I think, they did pretty good in the division. Now, conversely, you compare it to the Eagles. First 5 games for the Raiders, they're going to be on the road playing the Chargers. Then they're going to go home and play the track team, the Arizona Cardinals. And then they're going to go on the road and play Tennessee. And then they're going to fly back to Las Vegas and play the Broncos. And then they get an extra day, but the following Monday night, they're going to fly out and play Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. Yep. That's a tough 5 games. If they can come out of those 5 games 3-2, better yet, if you can come out of that 4-1, you've made a statement. And so it rests on them. And unfortunately, I don't think it's too early in the season to say, you got, those first 5 games, there's your statement, because you've got 3 division games right there. And wow, that's going to be, after that, it's going to be Houston, New Orleans, Jacksonville. Do I think they're going to go over 8.5 wins? Yeah, I do. I'll stand by I believe they're going to win 10 games. 10 games and 7, that's still, it's better than 500. It's not the best. I'm not saying they're going to go 14-3, but 10-7, I can see that realistically.
Yeah, I kind of see them as, we'll bring some NCAA basketball lingo into it. They're kind of that bubble team, because I do think 10-7 is going to be tiebreaker or, a wild card. I don't think 10-7 wins the West, but it's definitely a wild card area to keep an eye on. I agree with you. I see this team going above 8.5. And like you said, I mean, if they could come out of that first 5 games at 3-2 or 4-1, you have more than likely 2 division wins immediately out of the gate. More than likely, if that's how that's going to go. Very interesting, though, the way that schedule goes. You got the track meet team in Arizona, and then the next week you have the just bruisers who are just going to run the ball down your throats. I mean, you thought they ran the ball last year a lot. Well, They don't have AJ Brown now, so they're going to run it even more. So that'll be an interesting kind of yin and yang for the Raiders to have to kind of deal with. But I agree. I think the Raiders will be better than the 8.5 that they're giving them. I just think they're going to kind of pick up a few wins like they did last year in games that maybe we didn't expect them to. So
right.
Now this is, of course, for our brother who ain't here. It is the New Orleans Saints, who have the lowest figure out of all 3 of our teams. The New Orleans Saints are 7.5 for the over under. I'll get this one started myself personally. I think this is doable for the Saints, if only for the fact that they may be I think they're the second best team in that division. Not big on Carolina. I don't think Atlanta's there, or even getting there. So they have an opportunity to kind of pick 3, maybe 4 wins off of Carolina and Atlanta. And hey, who knows? Maybe you could beat the Bucks in the dome. Boom. There's 5 wins right there. Right. We're already halfway plus to where we need to be. So I like the over here as well. I like the over on all of these, which scares me. But I really do think the Saints, with everything, I will say the Sean Payton, of course, not being there anymore, that will be something to keep an eye on. But it was and his name escapes me, but the individual who they brought in, he was with Peyton for the last 4 or 5 years. So you're kind of more losing the name and the person, not so much the procedures and the playbook and things like that. You're not starting over. You're not going from for the Eagles when they went Peterson to Sirianni. You're not doing that. You're going to somebody that different name, but understands what it takes to win in that division. And I still think they have one of the best home field advantages in football, especially now that we're back to kind of full capacity, because that was kind of a weird one in 2020 when we're trying to handicap games. And it's like, wait, no one cares about home field advantage in this one. Outside of Denver, no one cares about it. That doesn't matter. So that's definitely something they'll be excited to, because I almost feel like last year we didn't get 100% capacity until about mid-season, if I'm remembering correctly. I could be wrong.
That's correct.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting to kind of see the full season of the Dome rocking, or at least hopefully Jameis will keep them rocking. But I do think there are pieces there that can get something done. And I don't know about, 8 or 9, or I don't know about 9 or 10 wins, but I think 8 is very doable for the Saints. But Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Saints 7.5.
Yeah, completely agree. I think they're going to have an easy time with Atlanta. Not easy time, but I think they get those 4 wins: Atlanta, Carolina, Tampa Bay, who we didn't even talk about. And we didn't talk about all the drama with Tom Brady and Tom Brady sitting out and all that. Speaking of drama, but I will tell you, I don't know if Tampa Bay is going to come back and be the Tampa Bay they've been. If mentally he's not there, and I know these guys, they, everybody claims, no, they're like machines. They can turn it off and they can just go out and do this, that, and the other. At some point, you wonder. And especially just, we'll wait and see. Maybe I'm going to be completely wrong on that, but I really see New Orleans and Tampa Bay possibly just, maybe not the best records in the NFC, but I can see them battling for who's going to be the top dog out there in their division.
Yeah, I mean, it's been pretty much the last 6-7 years. We're all kind of just waiting for Tom Brady to kind of regress, right? Like, I mean,
like Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, well,
he can't be good again.
Yeah, it's so. I mean, I feel like it's the same old story, at least in my mind. Like, I'm not sold on Brady. And I do think there was one, obviously, you talk about the drama. He retired and maybe the shortest retirement. I feel like it was like 2 weeks or something like that. But that changed just in those 2 weeks, just everything. Tampa went from, I don't quite remember, but they probably went from, plus 200 to win the division to plus 700 to win the division, back to plus 150 in a span of 3 weeks, just because of one guy. And I think last year that defense got exposed at times, especially in the playoff game against the Rams. Now they were good enough to, the Rams the Buccaneers worked their way back into it. But I vividly remember that Cooper Kupp reception with they kick off and everyone's going, okay, we're going to overtime. And then all of a sudden Cooper Kupp runs a drag route and he runs for 45 yards. That right there, I've never been a defensive coordinator, never will be. I will, I'll help you out if you want, but you got to keep an eye on Cooper Kupp, period, in any situation. They end up doing that, going down, kick the field goal. So I really do wonder if that's something that does come back and bite Tampa. It's a great call. I think, at some point Brady has to become mortal. He has to look down and go, I'm 42 years old. I shouldn't be able to do this. And we'll see, but they still have weapons. They still have Leonard Fournette. They still have Mike Evans. They still have a pretty good defense. But yeah, I agree. I think the Saints are going to be a little closer than most people believe in that division.
Yeah, definitely.
That's all we got for you this week as we get ready to, 17, 18, 19, actually 23, 24 straight weeks now. It's talking football. Can't wait for that. Raider Jim, final thoughts for this first edition of the 2022 NFL podcast.
Yeah, like I said, I'm very glad to be back. Thank you for once again inviting me to be part of this. I really appreciate it. And, I'll get the WD-40 out and get the rest of the rust off my game, and we'll be ready to go next week, because we're going to have to start talking point spreads, favorites, and who to put your money on. And you can be sure we'll be bringing that to you as well.
I agree. And I may be a little biased here, but I think we're both in mid-season form. I thought that went really well. We were both bringing the heat. And you got out of that hibernation and you've already eaten that deer. So you're ready.
According to what the note you sent me, I guess I only have to be good for 8.5 games.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know where the half ends or begins, but yeah. And for me, football isn't my favorite sport. Baseball is, and that's just because I played it for 15 years. I'm never gonna, oh, this is better than that. If you think baseball is boring, that's fine. I'm not gonna argue with you. But for me, the thing I love about football is the day. It's the Sunday. You wake up, and if you're out here on the West Coast, it's for me, it's usually wake up about 8:30, look at the board, see what's happened, put some bets in, update your fantasy team. 10 o'clock rolls around, turn on Red Zone, or you turn on your team's game, and for the next 10, 12 hours, if you so please, you are in football heaven.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, as somebody who just kind of, after bartending for 13 years and not knowing what a weekend is, to now moving to kind of corporate side and the office side, those Sunday scaries, they're real. But with football, I think they'll be a little less scary. I can't wait for next Sunday, which of course be September 11th, another day in American history. We always have to kind of take a moment to think about other things than football. But it will be time to start NFL football. And whew, I tell you what, it's perfect weather for a cold beverage. So might as well crack one open and enjoy some football here in about 10, 11 days. And we will be here next week for you to break it all down. Hopefully we'll have Coach here with us, giving you some tips and picks for all of that. But with that, thank you all so much for listening to this edition of the NFL podcast presented by the First Off the Bench Podcast Network. Everyone comes off the bench, but we are first. It's time for y'all to go wash your hands and stop hating everybody. We'll talk to y'all next week. Take care.
Peace out, everybody.